What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football schedule preview and very early projected record series. The Pittsburgh Panthers are up next. Before we look ahead to 2025, let's take a look back at what Pittsburgh did in 2024. Here are my projections and predictions last year for Pittsburgh. My projection had them at 6-6, and then my prediction for them was 7-5. So I was right on the money with their official prediction, going 7-5 last year in the regular season. So yeah, Pitt did about what I expected them to do as a consistent program in the ACC. I know a lot of people were kind of expecting this team to be the worst team in the conference last year, but I didn't really think Pittsburgh was going to do that. I knew they were going to turn things around after a disappointing year in 2023, and with, a young team from that year, and then, of course, coming back for the next year, they did grow. So, yeah, Pittsburgh had a pretty solid season last year, but if you count their bowl game loss at the end of the season, this team went 7-6 overall last year. And you look at the schedule from last season in 2024. First off, you look at who they played in the non-conference. They had Kent State, Cincinnati on the road, West Virginia, so a couple of Big 12 teams in there. And then they also had Youngstown State. So the non-conference schedule wasn't too tough, but you had a couple of Power 4 teams out of the Big 12 there in Cincinnati and West Virginia. But they were able to win both of those games. And then you take a look at the home schedule in the conference. They played California, Syracuse, Virginia, and Clemson all at home last year. Then you look at the road schedule. They played North Carolina, SMU, Louisville, and Boston College. So look at this start here that Pittsburgh had last year. This team started out 7-0 from August 31st all the way to October 24th. And then you go into the month of November. They lost all 5 of their games in the month of November. Yeah, it was the complete opposite. They started off well, and then they finished the season really disappointing. But either way, they were still able to make it to a bowl game. They started off 7-0 and then lost their last 5 games in a row. But yeah, they went 7-5 last year in 2024. What does the schedule look like for 2025? Here is that schedule for Pitt. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at their opponents in the non-conference. So this is their non-conference schedule. They will play Duquesne, Central Michigan, on the road at West Virginia, and then, of course, Notre Dame. So non-conference schedule pretty similar to last year. You got a couple of cupcakes here, but not any Big 12 teams, not a couple of Big 12 teams like you had last year. You get to play West Virginia again, but this time it will be on the road, of course, in that rivalry game. And then you got Notre Dame as well. So pretty tough non-conference schedule there when you got West Virginia out of the Big 12 and then Notre Dame, an independent team. Notre Dame does normally play like ACC opponents, so that's pretty much the reason why they got Notre Dame probably in the non-conference as well. So yeah, not a bad non-conference schedule, but when you add Notre Dame and West Virginia in there, it does make the non-conference schedule a little bit tough. Let's now take a look at their home games in the ACC. They will play Louisville, Boston College, NC State, and Miami. All very winnable games here for Pitt. Louisville, Boston College, and NC State, I think those are definitely very winnable games. They might be an underdog against the Cardinals, but remember a couple years ago, they beat Louisville at home, so that probably is kind of like a back-and-forth series between those two teams. And then obviously Miami, that's probably their biggest game here at home, but I wouldn't be surprised here if Pitt came out here and probably pulled off the upset, because we know the Panthers are kind of known for that. As a consistent team in the ACC, they are known for pulling off some big upsets every year. So that's your home schedule here in the ACC for the Panthers. Let's now take a look at the away games. They will play at Florida State, at Syracuse, at Stanford, and then at Georgia Tech. So not a bad road schedule here for Pitt. Some of these games are pretty winnable. Florida State, I would say, is a pretty winnable game just based off of where they were last year. Same thing with Syracuse. But, Syracuse, pretty tough place to play, and so is Florida State. Georgia Tech will be a little bit tough, but that should be a pretty even matchup. And then you got Stanford, one of the worst teams in the ACC last year. I know Stanford is not going to be pretty much a game that they could probably have problems in, but no, it's on the road, it's out west and everything, so you have to travel out west here against Stanford, which definitely is a tough one. When we see teams go out west, it does make the schedule a lot tougher here for Pittsburgh. So that's your away schedule. Let's now go back to the schedule here and go full game by game now. Again, they'll start things off with Duquesne on August 30th, then you got Central Michigan on September the 6th, then you play West Virginia on the road on September 13th. So they play 3 out of their 4 non-conference games in the first 3 weeks, and then they get a bye week after West Virginia. Then they come out of the bye week to play Louisville on September 27th. Then you got Boston College at home on October the 4th. Then you go back on the road to play Florida State on October the 11th. Then also Syracuse on the road on October 18th. So back-to-back road games there with Florida State and Syracuse. That's pretty tricky there for Pittsburgh. Then you got NC State at home on October 25th. Then you go out west here to play Stanford on November 1st, and then after that they get another bye week, so they get time to recover after the trip to Stanford and also going out west. I think that's a really good spot for a bye week. They get Notre Dame at home on November 15th. Then you got Georgia Tech on the road on November 22nd, and then you close things out with Miami on November 29th at home. So not a bad schedule for Pittsburgh. It seems like almost every game they play, though, is a very winnable game, but Notre Dame and Miami, those 2 games will definitely be tough. And then you got West Virginia in the non-conference. That's also going to be kind of tough, but it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen. So let's now get into the projection here for Pittsburgh. This is the scale I'll be using here for their official projection. Basically, a 1% game in the red is pretty much counted as an automatic loss. 20% games in the orange, those are games where Pittsburgh will be about a double-digit underdog, and then 40% in the yellow, that's where Pittsburgh will be a clear underdog by 6 or 7 points, so by about a touchdown. 50-50 games are obviously games that really can go either way, and then 60% games in the purple, those are games where Pittsburgh will be favored by 6 or 7 points, so by about a touchdown. 80% in the blue, that's where Pittsburgh's going to be favored by double digits, and then 99% in the green, that's pretty much where Pittsburgh's going to have automatic wins. So we'll start with the easy wins here for Pittsburgh. I think you got a couple of them here at 99% in the green. You got Duquesne and Central Michigan. I think these 2 opponents for Pittsburgh are definitely over that 95 to 99% range. They definitely should be able to take care of business in both of these games. It would be a big shock if Pittsburgh definitely lost one of these 2 games, but I just do not see that happening. And I know Central Michigan is a group of 5 team, but they haven't been really good as of late. So I think Pittsburgh will be a big favorite. Both of these games, they could be favored by 20 plus or even more. They'll probably be favored against, Duquesne by even 30 plus, or maybe just 20 plus in general. But yeah, these 2 games, I think Pittsburgh definitely will be big favorites in both of them. And again, they're counted as automatic wins here in this projection. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. There's not really any other games on here where you can favor the Panthers by double digits at 80% in the blue, and then also by 6 or 7 points in the purple at 60%. But I think you have a couple of games on here where I think you can put the Panthers as a clear underdog, and those are going to be the 2 toughest games, in my opinion, at home against Notre Dame and Miami. I think Pittsburgh will be a clear underdog in both of these games by, again, 6 or 7 points, so by about a touchdown, somewhere in that particular point range. Notre Dame and Miami, just because they're both at home, that's the reason why they both, ended up being in the yellow instead of the orange. If both of those games were on the road, they would definitely be in the orange. And yeah, I think they'll be a 6 or 7 point underdog against both of those teams. They are absolutely games that Pittsburgh can definitely pull off the upset. Plus, they're in the month of November, so teams are kind of better by this time, and this is usually the month where, upsets start to happen. But, upsets seem like they're always happening anywhere and any time in any month. So, yeah, Notre Dame and Miami, I think Pittsburgh will be 6 or 7 point underdogs in both of those games. And then that leaves you with 8 50-50 games. I think all the rest of these games here that you're seeing in the white are pretty much even matchups in the 50-50 range. Again, West Virginia is a rivalry. That's a game that really can go either way. And then the rest of your ACC games, Louisville, Boston College, Florida State, Syracuse, NC State, Stanford, and Georgia Tech. I think these are all just pretty even matchups. Now, Stanford, I think Pittsburgh is definitely the better team, but because of that game being out west, that's pretty much the reason why it ended up being a 50-50 game instead of being in the purple or something, or maybe instead of the blue. Again, if it was at home for Pittsburgh, I would definitely put it in that 60% range. I would definitely favor the Panthers by 6 or 7 points, but as of right now, I'm going to call that as a 50-50 game. And again, some of these matchups here in the 50-50 range are just pretty even for Pittsburgh. And again, as a consistent program in the ACC, you just got so many, games that really can go either way. So yeah, 8 games here that I think could really go either way. 8 total 50-50 games here for Pittsburgh. So what does the projection come out to be when you average all this out? Well, we count the green games as wins, and then you average out those 2 games in the yellow at 40%. Average out all 8 of these 50-50 games games at 50%, and let's say they split them. Let's say they win 4 out of the 8 50-50 games, and then they probably, of course, they're going to be underdogs against Notre Dame and Miami, but then they get those 2 other wins in the green. That's going to give you a total of 4 50-50 wins, and then also those 2 green games in the green, those are counted as wins as well, so that's going to give you a total of 6 wins, and that's what the projection is, 6-6 here for Pittsburgh in 2025. I think that's a pretty fair projection considering, all these 50-50 games being pretty even matchups, and then also just Pittsburgh in general as a consistent program. You kind of expect them to be right there around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that win range. They were able to do that last year, get to like 7 wins, and at best they can probably go 8-4 or maybe 7-5. I think that's the best case right now, is 7-5 for Pittsburgh at 6-6, and definitely is the mid case, and then probably your worst case scenario is 5-7 and not making it to a bowl game. But if Pittsburgh goes like 4-8 or 3-9, yeah, that's kind of a disappointing year, especially after coming off a decent season last year and a pretty solid year for Pittsburgh as well. But yeah, I think Pittsburgh, you kind of expect them to be right there around 6, 7, 8 wins, and that is what the projection is, and that is to get to a bowl game at 6-6 for 2025 barely. Again, if you split the 50-50 games, you win 4 out of the 8, and then you get those 2 wins in the green. That'll give you to 6 wins. So that is what the projection is, 6-6 here for Pittsburgh. Do you guys agree or disagree? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on Pittsburgh. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.